I decided to create a series of YouTube videos dedicated to my personal experience and journey of quote unquote hearing voices, something that has often been a mental health issue analyzed by others and people in society. I thought I would ultimately bring up and share my personal experience of this phenomenon of hearing voices, because personally I think not only do people find this whole claim and idea interesting that one can hear voices, but also I thought I would note my personal experience, because I believe that at the end of this, we may or may not believe that this is particularly an issue related to mental health and maybe something else even. And so I would like to start off my experience and journey with hearing voices by describing exactly what I experienced and comparing it to what I think most people think of this whole mental health issue, or at least hearing voices from the perspective of a mental health issue. Firstly, I would like to say that my own personal impression of hearing voices from the perspective of mental health before this all happened, I think was like many people. We would go on to believe that, oh, well, this is really an issue of someone hearing perhaps voices that are randomly shouting things at you. It is commands that are being shouted at you even at times. And this is what it can be defined as in a medical sense. My personal experience with hearing voices, I think actually can be relatable to what other people have experienced, or at least claim in terms of hearing voices. I think it's believable when someone says that you're hearing voices and they can be abusive, that this is also a typical phenomenon of hearing voices when it comes to the mental health side of it. And this has very much been my personal experience with the whole phenomenon of hearing voices. The voices that I do hear that I've heard for the past, ever since the year of 2021, in the spring of 2021 when I discovered them, it has often been purely, or most often, perhaps 70% to 90% of my experience on a daily basis is of voices hurling insults and abuses. Now, let's go on to my own personal experience of this. I would like to describe the constant theme that I currently experience, that I've currently experienced for the last about 2 years or so, ever since I've discovered these voices. Now, at first, I didn't believe them. I did not believe the voices. After all, they're just a bunch of voices in my head. And they're going on to claim and say that, well, we're voices or individuals or entities or what have you, and we thrive, we harvest your negative emotions. We thrive on and harvest your negative emotions, such as fear, such as humiliation, such as anger, and so on. Now, at first, when these voices said this to me, I didn't particularly believe the claim that they made. It took a long time. It took quite some time for me to believe this. This is still what is claimed to me to this very day. And I really can't say much more about that for the time being, other than by sharing my experience with you, the viewer or the observer. In this video, I also want to discuss and share with you exactly how this all started. So as I was saying to you before, this all started with me in the spring of 2021 at my dorms at York University. Now, my personal journey and story, I think, is an interesting one because it starts off with these voices claiming that they are a mystery cult. They are a mystery society. Now, ultimately, what these voices asked me to engage in at York University, at the university that I was attending, they asked me to engage in what I personally thought was very risky behavior, or an act that I could not trust. The act or behavior that they asked of me was essentially that I was to lay down in my dorm on the bed, listening to music, and allow someone to enter my dorm. And ultimately, I said to the voices in my head that, well, from my perspective, this doesn't seem like the most intelligent thing to carry out. This could be a test or a game. To which the voices said to me that, you're right, you are correct. We are playing a game. We are testing you, in fact, here at the university. And so much of the night, for that night that I initially discovered the voices, they presented this discourse to me in this very same way that, well, any act or thought or whatever we say to you can be interpreted as a move on a giant chessboard, where the chessboard is all of society. It is anything and everything that can be carried out. Am I still playing the game? I'm not sure. I very well could be, according to these voices in my head. Now, you have to keep in mind that the voices, they interpreted the game as anything and everything that could be carried out. It could be a phrase, it could be a philosophy, it could be an idea, it could be me going for a walk. And that the response to any move or action that I make could be considered a response. So let's say I go for a walk and then I see something happen. That could also be considered a response by them, and then I would have to choose a move after that. And so that's essentially the beginning or the origin story of the voices that I have to share with you currently. Like I said, this is going to be a YouTube video series because this leads into a whole journey that I've had with these voices. And it will lead to me discussing and going into detail in how these voices exactly operate and what they exactly carry out. At the end of this, it's going to sound something like a black hat cabal of the deep state or a quote-unquote Illuminati faction that is carrying out what sounds like an Orwellian method of monitoring and observing citizens. And ultimately, this is my story or my account of it that I have to share with people to warn people about, because I want people to understand that if this is the experimental technology or techniques that they're carrying out on me, who knows what they're going to carry out on the public in the near future. And so this all ultimately starts with this idea that I have voices in my head. However, voices that I will tell you for now have claimed to not just only have the ability to read my thoughts and everything I think of so they can thrive on my negative emotions. They have the ability to see my imagination. They have the ability to manipulate my thoughts and thus potentially in the future manipulate your thoughts without you even knowing it. I think I was lucky enough to discover these voices and discuss them with you. But ultimately, it will be up to people like me and myself to uncover, to expose what these voices are so we can prevent what I think are great tragedies that can occur in the near future. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for listening.